Listen to the sound of footsteps in the dark, to voices that may not be quite human, to the sound of screams in the night. The Haunted Cabaret, the home of all things horror, on Rhode with your host, George Garner. The Haunted Cabaret starts now.
That was Black Sabbath, Paranoid. Probably my all-time get this show rolling song. Right? That and, probably Godzilla is a close second. But no, I think Paranoid is it. Paranoid, otherwise known as a state of heightened awareness. And, I'm George Garner, as usual, host of the show. At the controls is Tony Jones. No Chuckles the Clown, my co-host again this week. I think he has reached that state of heightened awareness. He's out there on the proverbial undead ledge.
Getting ready to be reincarnated for the next time.
Well, yeah, he's apparently it works for him.
Right before All Hallows Eve.
Yeah, he says he's apparently done it 5 times before. And he's probably ready to do it again. Me personally, I would much prefer if instead of considering his latest reincarnation, he would consider doing working on the horror film and Haunted Cabaret half-hour episodic treatment that I suggested to him. But apparently not. I'll tell you, one person, though, we got to do a little shout-out to, Tony, is our former, now he's our former drummer, R.J. Gregory, who quit the band to be apparently an entrepreneur, right? He has no time left for drumming because, he's got his regular job, but he's also got this sideline now that And I'll tell you, every time, you say to yourself, okay, what else is there to do? What's there for me to do? There's no entrepreneurial opportunities. There's no business opportunities. Well, and it was a drummer that thought of this. So, I mean, if a drummer can think of it, I mean, come
There's
on.
hope for anyone.
Yeah, everybody should stop moaning and groaning because, but all kidding aside, our former drummer, RJ Gregory, has started a productive little business for himself, manufacturing. I don't know, what would you say? He started out manufacturing all natural organic brooms, I guess, right?
I mean, he started at the convention as just a table to show his oddities, and then he brought some of these handcrafted brooms and other occult-ish type crafts, and the conventions aren't exactly where you're going to become not going to retire off of doing any of the conventions. It's a lot of looky-loos, but he was like just selling out all weekend.
Yeah, and it came from the most humble of origins, right? He was just out hiking in the woods, and he saw all these downed trees.
Yeah.
And, and somewhere in his mind, he knew that, birch trees are the thing to use when you're constructing either brooms or anything for a witch's coven.
I wouldn't have known that.
Me neither.
I know a lot of useless stuff, and I would not have known that.
Me neither. I mean, I knew, in theory, covens use this, and this, but not the nuts and bolts of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, but apparently, so he got inspired. He just gathered up an armful of birch branches, birch twigs, and took them home and started. No, he didn't set out to start a business, right? He didn't set out to start a profitable business.
So, no.
He just did it for fun. Yeah, he made a witch's broom for himself, and he made I think a wizard's walking staff.
Yeah.
Right? A walking stick. And and he brought a couple of them to the convention, like Tony said, and he can't keep up with the orders.
Yeah. Which, by the way, I will mention again that was my idea, and that I expect a commission. I'm sure he's just saving up my commissions. He'll pay me all at once.
What was your idea? To take it to the convention?
To do Paracon, yeah.
Okay, well, yeah, I would say you're entitled to something for that. I wouldn't.
And I even hooked him up with, Ken and the people so he could book the table there.
Right. I would also suggest, Tony, that, these covens are very happy with him. I wouldn't put too much pressure on him for your percentage.
True.
Yeah, think twice. I mean, there is such thing as the old saying, penny wise and pound foolish.
Now, there's 2 points that is perfectly made, which are points that I've made and I've heard on different business podcasts. Not that the Haunted Cabaret is a business podcast, but one reoccurring theme in business podcasts is that it's always the most random thing that you think of that becomes a profitable business. So people go out and they think, I'm going to open a restaurant, I'm going to open a nightclub, whatever it may be, established business, and they're a flop. But a random thing, such as making witches' brooms, is something that takes off.
Right, and the reason for that isn't very hard to see, right? I mean, there's already hundreds of thousands of restaurants.
Yeah.
There's already hundreds of thousands of pretty much anything mainstream that you already see up and down the street. How many artisans have now there's people in woodwork and things like that, but how many people have concentrated on producing coven merchandise?
Who knew there was so many witches?
Yeah, I mean, and I mentioned to Ajay last time we were having a discussion. He was showing me his new business, and he mentioned that he beat me to it by about 2 seconds. The Druids. Now he's just manufacturing equipment and necessities for the when we say witches, we mean the Wicca covens, right? Yeah. I mean, there's a whole other school of if he gets tired of working in birch for the witches covens. Like I said, he can always go into working with oak for the Druids. I mean, oak is big with the Druids. Then, if he gets tired of manufacturing the equipment, what's wrong with doing a little landscaping? Yeah. Do a little landscaping, plant Druid circles. Yeah, I mean, hats off to him. God, we wish him luck.
There's just one other point, and that is maybe you agree with me, maybe you don't agree with me, but in my opinion, and I don't think this is just hyperbole, there has not been a better time in the history of the world to start a business. I mean, when could you have as easily taken your product to the marketplace
and gotten as much exposure for
Yeah.
it? You mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, with social media and if you utilize all the tools at your disposal.
Well, yeah.
I mean, that's the big if.
Yeah.
That's what's not a given. That's the if. And I'll tell you, and the funny thing is that there's a lot of young folks out there that, now we're not exactly grandpas here at the Cabaret.
No, but we get some gray around the temples.
A tiny bit.
I got more gray in my beard than I wish to notice.
Well, I like to think that the gray in my hair is from exercising a tremendous intellect and will, and pondering, during those third shifts, the mysteries of the universe. But no, but by all means, I mean, you're right, Tony. The tools are there.
Yeah.
Now, what you probably don't want to do, and it kind of fits in with what we mentioned already, it's a really rotten time because of all the government regulation.
Right.
To start one of those restaurants.
Yeah.
To open a new drugstore, to start a new car wash. Anything that's that there's thousands of already, and you're going to have to compete on thin profit margins.
Yeah.
Don't do it. It's kind of like,
which I think pushes people even more so to be disruptors and just do their own thing.
Yeah, and if you think that you need, the expertise in tech, which that thinking leads some people astray too. Not all businesses are created on the internet.
Yeah.
I mean, our friend RJ, what's more traditional than that, right? Handmade equipment.
Now, speaking of bringing products to the market and social media, I was pinged on social media today for the fact that somebody purchased a fine, gently used Tony Jones and the Cretan 3 T-shirt at the Salvation Army in Warwick today.
Wow, how gently used.
It looks like it's in pretty good shape. You can tell it's been washed a few times, but
right, worn by man or woman.
I can't tell. Yeah.
Well, if it's stretched in front, it's worn by one of our female fans who hopefully yanked it over her head many times in the throes of passion.
It was probably one of the many, raffle items that we've donated over the years that you just begged us for a donation and then chucked it to Salvation Army.
That's possible. But you know what? That just knocked me right off my train. That just knocked my train of thought right off the rails. You're picturing a big set of tits inside a Tony Jones shirt. I mean,
maybe we'd sell more shirts if we got a picture of that.
Yeah, maybe. Well, I know that all my girlfriends not that I have girlfriends anymore. Having recently taken the plunge and put the Ring of Mordor on my finger. But, all my girlfriends since I've been in music have worn band T-shirts.
Sure,
so,
yeah. That's I mean, that's a time-honored tradition.
Yeah. Your girlfriend puts on a band shirt and goes to work for you.
Almost the equivalent of, wearing a Letterman jacket back in the 50s.
Absolutely. Let's go back, Tony. Let's go back to the music for a second, because I remember on our last show we got barely half the music in that we wanted to get in. So
since we've apparently turned this into a business podcast, I mean, there's a lot to talk about.
Okay, enough with the business podcasts. We did our
talk about Bitcoin.
That's all that has to happen. You know what? We may have to do that because I still don't get what's so appealing about it. I really don't. I've looked at it. I've studied it. There's been, well-researched articles about it. I've studied.
Yeah.
When we come back, Tony, well, first of all, I want to talk about H.P. Lovecraft because we just passed his birthday.
Right, yeah.
On August 20th, so we'll mention that. I want to mention on this show the carnivorous elevators that now inhabit the Turk's Head building in downtown Providence.
Oh, jeez.
Yes, they have developed a taste for human flesh and human suffering.
Well, it's only a matter of time.
Absolutely, and the time has come. Well, we have Hurricane Harvey, right, which is a stupid name for a hurricane. And there's some debate about whether Donald Trump is responsible for that, too.
See, now, as a hardcore radio...
Or was it George Bush? I forget.
As a hardcore radio nerd, when I think of Hurricane Harvey, all I can think of is Paul Harvey, the long past DJ or talk radio guy
right,
from
who
back
was
in the day.
pretty full of hot air himself,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So, yeah. Okay, then let's see. I did make a couple of notes this week because there were so many things I wanted to either mention or think about mentioning. Then I got another little note here: demented world leaders.
Well, we could do a whole hour on that.
We could do a whole hour on all of these. Really come to think of it. All right, but in the meantime, all right, let's go with a little Motorhead. Love Me Like a Reptile here on the Haunted Cabaret on Rhode Island Free Radio. All right, that was Motorhead, Love Me Like a Reptile, off the Ace of Spades album. I think, without even any debate, Motorhead's best album. Two things about that song, though. As much as I like that song, we are going for honesty and transparency here on the Cabaret. Lyric-wise, Lemmy, Somewhere Where You Are in the Great Beyond. An electric eel is not a reptile.
Oh, yeah.
Even though I understand the temptation to use it. Picturing your girlfriend wrapped in an electric eel around her private parts, tempting. I like the imagery, but it's not a reptile. The other one is music-wise. Don't think I didn't notice those chords from Born to Be Wild at the very end.
Yeah.
You couldn't think of a damn other thing to do to end that song, could you? Yep, and no problem with it. Actually, Born to Be Wild is one of my, fossil rock though it is. Born to Be Wild is one of my, that's one of those songs I've always wanted to redo because, words and music, it is one of my favorite songs probably ever, and I don't even ride a bike.
We should start a fossil rock podcast here.
Yeah, with Fossilize. No, that's why we play so much goat horror on this show, so that we do not fall into the temptation, as so many people do, of becoming like hopelessly nostalgic and embalmed.
Which I never understood in alternative media, right? So there's plenty of shows in alternative media that are just doing the same old tired crap that's on traditional media. Why put all that effort in just to do the same diarrhea?
You mean in terms of music or in terms of format?
Both.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I guess lack of imagination is one thing. Because just because we have a new media format doesn't mean we have the imaginations to fill in the format, right? Yeah. I mean, when moving pictures were first invented, right, all they did was sit a camera in front of a stage and tape theatrical productions, right? It took quite a while, for imaginations to catch up with the new technology. Why do independent wrestling organizations, mimic exactly the World Wrestling Entertainment, which has a product that sucks now, but they feel that they have to imitate it? I mean, lack of imagination. And then actually when you get to the written word too, I mean, I read a couple of printed word horror stories lately. It's like, it's copying. I mean, it's not like people today are copying like Lovecraft or Edgar Allan Poe. It's like they're copying the people who copied H.P. Lovecraft. Really dreadful stuff. Like, it really is. I think, well, if you want to cultivate imagination, I think what helps is, I know what works for me, is don't just stick in your particular genre. I mean, if you want to make, I don't know, well, if you want to write horror stories, take that as an example, because that's what I'm doing some of lately, is the worst thing in the world if you want to write horror stories is just to read horror stories. I mean, nothing wrong with seeing what's been done before in your chosen field of endeavor, but what really helped me is read a bunch of other different stuff by other authors who don't write horror. See how they, and the proof of that is that most of the great horror novels, and quite a few of the great horror stories, but especially most of the great horror novels, have been written by non-horror genre writers. When you really think about it, The Exorcist was written by William Peter Blatty, who wrote mostly comedy and non-supernatural suspense. Rosemary's Baby was written by Ira Levin. I think that might be one of the few horror stories he ever wrote. Jaws was written by Peter Benchley, who writes mostly just straight adventure. And for all you real horror connoisseurs / nerds, I don't know, Tony, when does a nerd or a geek become a connoisseur? But wherever that line is, possibly one of the greatest horror stories ever written is called The Turn of the Screw. It was written back back too long ago for me to want to consider, actually, because it's been a while now. But it was written by Henry James, and it was one of a handful of supernatural ghost stories that he ever wrote. I mean, mostly he wrote stories about ambassadors and diplomats and high society, and but then one dark night he just sat down and wrote this. So just don't. And the same goes for music too. I mean, even if you want to play, I don't know how many categories are there now. If you want to play metal, if you want to play psychobilly, if you want to play that god awful stuff that sounds like old rock and roll watered down, but they call it country and western. Whatever it is you want to play, I mean, listen to other stuff and bring those influences into it, and you'll be a lot better off. And actually, I'll tell you, and as far as movies, which I think started this little segment of comments, The Phantom of the Opera. Remember that, Tony? Lon Chaney Sr., the silent movie, The Phantom of the Opera. I made the mistake. Now, talk about old things that still work. Most old things wear out like Tony Jones's vehicles. Okay. Some things don't. Some things still work, and they'll probably keep on working forever. But Turner Classic Movies recently had, they showed the Lon Chaney Sr.'s Phantom of the Opera from, back in the 1920s. And I DVR'd it, so I could watch it. And I came home from work one day, tired, which was my first mistake. So I said, okay, I'm going to watch the Phantom of the Opera. I didn't realize how tired I was. I'll watch the Phantom of the Opera, relax doing that, then go to bed. Well, unfortunately for me, I fell asleep about 15 minutes into it. More unfortunate for me is I woke up about 20 seconds before the famous scene at the end where she pulls the mask off the Phantom of the Opera. So I awoke from sleep with my eyes on the TV, opened my eyes, and the first thing I see is the mask come off and this hideous thing staring in my face. It's still scary. So I guess what I'm saying is, go back, paleontologists dig up dinosaur fossils for a reason. Some of those things are really, they're still exciting. If you want to write, if you want to do music, if you want to make movies, if you want to start a business, if you want, whatever you want to do your, and I hate to use the word homework, right? What's a better word than homework?
Due diligence.
Yeah, that's, okay. Yeah, it's not much better, but it's a little better. Yeah. Look and see where your chosen endeavor came from. Look back a ways. Oh, and by the way, paleontology, that was one of my early and favoritist things to get interested in. Back when I think I was 5 or 6 years old, I first became interested in dinosaurs and prehistoric life. That's one thing that has never left me. Just for the record, my favorite dinosaur, Stegosaurus. My favorite prehistoric matchup is not Tyrannosaurus versus Triceratops, because I think one lunged by Tyrannosaurus and the fight's over if he lands. One charged by Triceratops. If he breaks his legs, it's over that way too. My favorite matchup is Allosaurus, who was a much more vicious and agile earlier version of Tyrannosaurus, against Stegosaurus. Stegosaurus with the spine, the back spines, and the 4 spikes on the tail that look like they could disembowel a city bus. And I'll tell you, it's not just me that's impressed by this either. I was quite a few years ago. I was at the museum. I was in New York, as a matter of fact, to play one of our shows, and I took the afternoon before the show to go to the Museum of Natural History. To the Hall of Dinosaurs, and one of the exhibits, the Jurassic era, is an Allosaurus and a Stegosaurus. 2 of the dinosaurs on exhibit, the skeletons are an Allosaurus and a Stegosaurus. Now, I'm impressed. But I'm also looking at the other people. It's interesting to see what other people think the first time they see.
Absolutely, I think some of the bigger events are more for people watching the people watching the events.
Yeah, and a father, and I could identify because the first time I was at that museum was when I was a little kid and my dad brought me. But I'm standing there in the Hall of Dinosaurs, and a dad walks in with his son, who was about the same age I was when my father took me there. And he walks over, to the Brontosaurus, and then he walks over to the Allosaurus, and it's, and then he comes to the Stegosaurus, and he just looks at the 2 foot, he just looks at the 2 foot spikes on this thing's tail, and you can read his face. It's like, that is scary. Like, your mind is just envisioning what that would do to a human being. Were it to, there's a reason, by the way, that, whatever creative powers operate in this universe put 60 million years between human beings and that Stegosaurus.
It's kind of like the old Crocodile Dundee line. That's not a knife. This is a knife. That's not a dinosaur. This is a dinosaur.
That's not a tail. This is a tail. Exactly. Yep. And I like the Jurassic Park movies too, but not as much as I should. Not as much as I should, because ever since they let that, well, I won't get on to this one because that'll get me on a rant. That'll get me on a conservative talk radio type rant. If I start to think about how they had that Spinosaurus in Part 3 beat that Tyrannosaurus Rex, it just, ooh. All right, before I take a bite out of this table thinking about it, let's go. Ooh, you know what? This next tune in the set list, Tony, we're making up for I don't know if you'd call it a screw up on our part, but you remember the last episode we played Alice Cooper's Devil Food off the Nightmare album, and right after Devil's Food, it led into the prologue to the Black Widow. Now that wasn't Tony's fault on the board. That was whoever split the songs up, from the CD, because they attached the prologue to the Black Widow to Devil's Food, and then they let the Black Widow itself hang fire. All right. So this week, what we're going to do, just remember what the Black Widow prologue sounded like from last week, because we don't have the time or the inclination or the energy to detach it from Devil's Food. So remember what you heard last week, and this is the song proper, per se, of the Black Widow here on the Haunted Cabaret on Rhode Island Free Radio.
These words he speaks are true. We're all humanary stew. If we don't pledge allegiance to the Black Widow. Horror that he'll bring, the horror of his sting, the unholiest of kings, the Black Widow. Our minds will be his toys, and every girl and boy will learn to be employed, the Black Widow. Love me, yes we love me, love him, yes we love him, love me, yes we love He sits upon his throne and picks at all the bones of his husbands and his wives he's devoured. He stares with a gleam, with a lamp so obscene, the virgins and the children he's deflowered. Love me, yes we love me, love him, yes we love him, love me, yes we love My thoughts are hot and crazed. My dreams are webbed in haze. Mindless, senseless days. The Black Widow. These things he says are true. We're all humanary stew. If we don't pledge allegiance to the Black Widow. The Black Widow.
All right, and that is the song that we didn't play last time, otherwise known as the Black Widow, Alice Cooper, off the Welcome to My Nightmare album. And like I was telling Tony under the music, I just missed by a few years being old enough to go see that show when Alice Cooper came to town and did the Welcome to My Nightmare tour. And and I've seen video of it, and it's one of those wish I was there moments.
And that was before Alice Cooper found Jesus.
Yes, and we've been working together a long time because that was going to be my very next observation. That yes, when you have lyrics in that song like "stares with a gleam and a laugh so obscene at the virgins and the children, he's deflowered," that is the lyrics of a man who has not found Jesus.
Jesus yet to come.
Yes, and I'm still an Alice Cooper fan, but as a matter of fact, Tony, as you just mentioned, Alice Cooper was here. Was it yesterday?
Yeah, last night.
I honestly, I've seen Alice Cooper in the past 10 years, and I really honestly had no urge to go again. I mean, he's always reliably entertaining, but there's just something missing these days. That, as Judas Priest would say, that touch of evil is missing from Alice Cooper. It's like now it's all kind of like the Rolling Stones do. I saw some video of the Rolling Stones recently, and they played "Sympathy for the Devil," but now there's like a little smile and a wink. It's even Black Sabbath, one of the best shows I ever saw. But when the grown up, as we'll say Black Sabbath, when they played their original theme song, Black Sabbath. Now Ozzy's still insane, which makes it. That's what Black Sabbath has going for it. These other bands don't. Is that Ozzy Osbourne is still genuinely demented. And if he's not a devil worshiper, he's doing the work of Satan unwittingly. But, Tony Iommi had the little smirk and smile, like, this is all silly. But he didn't make a dent in Ozzy, jumping around like a demonic-inspired toad.
Pee in his pants.
He might have done that, too. But
there's nothing more demonic than pee in your pants.
Yeah, I mean, but no, but Alice Cooper... Rolling Stones. Now even Kiss. I'm a big Kiss fan still, in spite of all their silliness and foolishness and efforts to sabotage their musical legacy. But no, it's the same thing. It's like there's not that sideshow carnival serious aura of freakiness about any of them anymore. That's why we play Goat Whore more often on this show than we play. Well, we still play Slayer, even though I was traumatized that day when I was in Las Vegas. I've told the story before, but not in quite a while. You know what? I'll tell it again, because if I'm going to be disillusioned, everybody's going to be disillusioned. No, I mean Slayer's still a good band and everything, but I was in Las Vegas, in downtown Las Vegas one day at the Four Queens Casino. I was playing blackjack, and you're sitting around the table. You start to chit chat and everything, between hands, and it just so happens that there was a couple of people there, and one of the people was this little old lady. Not old, she was a middle-aged lady. Looked like somebody's cheerful little aunt. The kind that makes cookies and stuff. And invites you to the house on Christmas. So we get to talking, and so, what do you do? What do you do? Everybody's talking about, So I asked the pleasant little old lady, what do you do? She goes, oh, I'm the caterer for Slayer. So my eyes lit up, right? I'm figuring this is a witch in disguise. So I said, oh, what are they, what's Slayer? What are they like? She goes, they're such nice boys. I still like Slayer. Not their last few albums, but still like Slayer. Salt of Heaven, Rain and Blood, Seasons in the Abyss. I mean, that's 3 ultimate albums, and it's also the only Slayer you need. I mean, after that, they kind of did the Alice Cooper thing. They're playing out the string. I went to see him on the Summer Mayhem tour, and I mean, they were okay, but they definitely substituted volume for any kind of creativity, and I mean, they're an arena band now. I hate to say it, but yeah. So around here, the band that gets the respect is Goat Whore. Struggling for attention, struggling for notoriety, constantly. I don't think there's a day that goes by when they're not on the road. They're really not. If you look at their schedule, it's like a road trip through hell. I mean, just endurance wise. They used to say that Slayer, through their career was auditioning to be the house band in hell. Well, no, now Goat Whore has that honor, so hopefully they make it. The other things here. Now, Tony, you'll observe, you're a witness to this. I'm actually looking at a written I'm looking at
Wow.
written notes. Okay, let's see. Lovecraft's birthday, August 20th. We didn't have a show that week, so I acknowledge it this week. This is the first show since his birthday. I celebrated Lovecraft. Actually, I had forgotten, what date it was. In other words, I didn't forget when Lovecraft's birthday was, but I forgot that it was that day. It was that weekend. So, just by coincidence, I started reading S.T. Joshi's biography of H.P. Lovecraft. So, by a happy coincidence, which Lovecraft would consider, only coincidence, I'll consider a little more than that, attach a little mystic significance to it. I was reading the biography of H.P. Lovecraft on Lovecraft's birthday without realizing it was the weekend of his birthday. And I'll tell you this, read that biography, and Joshi, most of his facts, he's got an incredible amount of facts in that book. A lot of the conclusions he comes to based on those facts is wrong. But still, it's a really good read. Most of the conclusions that I say are wrong. It's when it comes to interpreting Lovecraft stories and actually reading what Lovecraft wrote rather than what he thinks Lovecraft should have. Now, the funny thing is that Joshi criticizes August Derleth, who was a longtime friend of Lovecraft, and after Lovecraft died, Derleth created Arkham House, the publisher, in order to publish Lovecraft's work. And he did. He published Lovecraft's collected work in 3 volumes. And he also went on to publish the work of a lot of Lovecraft's admirers and disciples like Robert Bloch, Ramsey Campbell, Fritz Leiber, Ray Bradbury. So August Derleth did quite a bit. But he also tried to impose his own view on Lovecraft's mythos. August Derleth is the person who coined the term Cthulhu mythos, not Lovecraft. And Derleth tried to draw parallels because Derleth was a Christian, and I believe it said he was Catholic. So Derleth didn't like the atheistic and materialistic, universe of Lovecraft. So he tried to impose more of a Christian viewpoint. He tried to make Lovecraft's universe conform more to a Christian viewpoint, which it was never intended to do. As a matter of fact, most of what Lovecraft wrote was a mockery of, the Christian faith. He created his own gods out of calamari and, he created his own gods out of seafood, sex with amphibians, sex with apes. As a mockery of the Christian religion. So Christianity was definitely not what Lovecraft was about. And Joshi quite rightly criticizes Derleth for this. Now, the only problem is that Joshi is more of an atheistic, materialistic person than Lovecraft actually. Now, not more than Lovecraft actually was, because Lovecraft was an atheist and a materialist. But it's one thing to look at a writer's own beliefs, and you have to be able to separate them from the beliefs of the characters in his stories, if you follow what I'm saying. Yeah. In other words, just because Lovecraft was a materialist doesn't mean that the characters in his stories all have to be materialists. And this is how Joshi tries to read the stories. In other words, every story is supposed to be a reflection of Lovecraft's personal philosophy. And that's when Joshi gets just as screwed up dealing with Lovecraft stories as August Derleth, because they both have their own agendas. They should be, he should be a politician, him and his agenda. And actually, Caitlin Kiernan, who is an admirer of Lovecraft and a pretty good author in her own right, and I think she still lives right here in
she just had an event at Brown, actually. I think it was either part of Necronomicon or for Lovecraft's birthday.
Right, because
she's still in Providence.
Yeah, because the Necronomicon convention did take place.
Her books got me through some very lonely third shift security shifts.
I've read a couple
before the days of technology.
Yeah, I think the one that I read what I remember specifically, it involved the trilobite.
Yeah,
was it Over the Threshold? That was one of the well-known ones. And they found the gateway to the other dimension in a mine or a cave. Yeah, that was a good one. Lovecraft, has this aura built around him as being, slightly demented, and Caitlin Kiernan is demented. Caitlin Kiernan is more of a kook than Lovecraft could ever hope to be. And I mean this in a good way. I really do. I mean that in a good way. It was she, as a matter of fact, just to show my high regard for Caitlin Kiernan, she finally got St. Joshi to admit that Lovecraft was always writing about sex. Joshi had maintained for years that Lovecraft had a low sexual interest level in real life, and that all his stories, none of them had anything to do with sex. Well, I don't, it's a matter of interpretation. It's a matter of imposing your own beliefs on an author. What stories was he reading? Almost every other story written by H.P. Lovecraft involves sex with amphibians, sex with apes,